simple things reproduce more easily and more quickly. This is a truism, whether it's in the natural world or in the spiritual world. And so if we're serious about multiplying disciples and multiplying churches, we need to be thinking in simple patterns. When we speak of this kind of simple church, essentially we're talking about this. This triangle represents the simple church. This is a spiritual family. It's a spiritual family with Jesus in their midst as king. So for those of you who can't tell from my marvelous artistic ability, this is a crown, and the J stands for Jesus. So spiritual family with Jesus in their midst as king. And they focus on three things. Loving God, loving others, and making disciples. When Jesus was asked about the greatest commandment, he responded that the great commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Loving God. And the second is like it. Love others as yourself. He said, on those two hang all the law and the prophets. So essentially, he was saying that by loving God and loving others, you're fulfilling all the Old Testament commands. In the New Testament, just before his ascension, when Jesus spoke to his disciples and gave them the Great Commission, he was asking them to make disciples. These were his final words to them, the thing he wanted them to focus on. And the primary verb, the imperative in that command is make disciples. The other verbs there are actually participles, so going or as you're going, make disciples. And then how? Baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey all that I have commanded you. And so, part of making disciples is teaching them to obey all that Christ commanded. And so, it's a great summary of the New Testament. So, by obeying the Great Commandment and the Great Commission, we are fulfilling the purposes of God. So this is a simple church. You know, some people will say, oh, what about the ordinances? Well, did Christ command it? It's included, and so on. So all of the other things we normally think of in a definition for church, I suggest can actually be included in this. Now, what most people think of as a church entails more than this. It entails things like programs, budgets, buildings, staff. And there's nothing wrong with these things. And God has used churches that have these things to do much throughout history for his kingdom. But I would propose to you that these things are all optional. They're add-ons to the core of what it means to be a church. And if we're interested in multiplication, particularly rapid multiplication, these things actually become hindrances to that process. So if we are serving in an area where we're serious we're seriously wanting rapid multiplication, we need to focus on the interior of this, not the exterior of this. And I summarize this idea of the center part with the phrase, obey GC squared. Obey GC squared. Obey the Great Commandment and the Great Commission.